Hey friends, how are you doing? I'm here on a day off. I'm going to go take the motorcycle out tomorrow for a good 400 plus day ride, just to get out before it gets hot. July is just around the corner. We typically have the hottest weather during that time of the year. I found an interesting thing talking about our spirituality and your Christian walk. And one of the interesting things that I notice in the United States is the amount of deception and lies. People have their own agenda. There's a lot of, selfishness. And instead of just being true to yourself and being kind, seems to be fewer of those people around. Although it's still there, I think as time goes on, we get further away from that, and we do it under the guise of we think we're smarter than God. We understand how the world works now, and we spend less time with God and His direction because, we kind of are into ourselves a little bit more in a selfish way, and we pursue things that God doesn't want us to do, right? So anyway, talking about the government and what our responsibilities are, that comes down to a Christianity side of things. So 250 years ago, as this country was formed, there were certain inalienable rights that the founders knew what they were talking about. They'd left all these other countries where there was oppression, kings, or whatever, right? There was not the freedoms that we enjoy today. And they wrote those in the Constitution to say, protect yourself from these kind of things. And they really thought there would be a revolution or, an overthrow of the government on a regular time interval, because government is usually corruption. And if you're going to tell me that, well, Wall Street, we can't trust those guys, well, I think there's some truth to that. I think everybody kind of has a little greed, but don't assume that person in government doesn't have their own motives, and they're not greedy either. And once they have control of you, then you're going to go down a path of less freedoms, to the point where you're going to end up in a country that's unrecognizable, okay? And COVID was the perfect example of that. I don't think there's somebody sitting in a room thinking, how do we control all these people, right? Hey, let's do this, and then we can control the people. I think it's an insidious, slow migration towards, hey, I'm going to give up freedom for security. And in the case of COVID, and wearing masks and making you have a vaccine should demonstrate everything. Now, I know this isn't, I'm not talking about Christianity, but we're going to end up there. But that's what happened. And they had people walking around, of course, fearing death, which I get. When COVID first kind of came out, we were all a little concerned because we didn't know where this was going. But after a while, things just didn't make sense anymore, okay? And the government withheld a lot of data that would have helped us come along. Plus, doctors had, hey, why don't we try this? They'd lose their they would no longer be a doctor. They were threatened with it. So we found out why it's dangerous to go down that route. Now, my Christian component to our relationship to the government is this. When we were given freedom, we had to accept a moral component of that, okay? Because to be free and just say, I want to do what I want to do without any consequences is simply not correct, okay? You're correct if you say, I want to do what I want to do. I want to enjoy the freedom, as long as you're not forgetting about the Ten Commandments. And where is it that I shall not steal, false judgment? You know, all of these commandments, if you adhere to them, then have all the freedom that God made His country with, okay? The United States is a very unique study if you ever take a look at it. And for those that don't believe that God wasn't a component of it, doesn't know the Puritans, doesn't know the history of this country, all you got to do is go back to the Mayflower. And there were a lot of things that kind of played. Just go look at a coin, which we don't use anymore, but it says, in God we trust. Okay? So, in today's society, we have a lot of people that look at freedom and say, I can do anything I want. And they also want to put their thoughts onto the rest of society. And I look at it, and I go to our education system that teaches not one bit about godliness, the fear of God, moral standards, how society functions. They don't teach that. And they lie a lot about that. And you have to understand the education system is tied in with the government so heavily because that's where funding is. And we've got bad actors in there that want to keep society from thinking for themselves with critical thinking, with their own ideas and objectives. And one of the reasons the United States has done so well is because of that freedom in the entrepreneur that has this better idea, that wants to start a business, that innovates. Our DNA is no different than anybody that's in Australia, Europe, Soviet Union, the continent of Africa. Our DNA is no different. But how did we get here? And that was because we had these systems in place that limited what the government could do, but we also had a component of religion, Christianity, doing the right thing, that brought this country to the place it is today. Now, I've said many years ago, many years ago, that prosperity is a great thing to enjoy. But it's also a dangerous thing, and I think in the Bible you will find that God kind of pretty much said it that same way, and it's wisdom. And, you know, once we're prosperous, we forget about God, who brought us to this point where we have health care that can do amazing things to help you survive. If you have a heart attack, I had appendicitis, and they had no incisions. They used some kind of a thing to go in there, and I was out of the hospital that same day. Amazing. I had a friend who, when he was growing up, his best friend died of appendicitis. So a lot of these things that we should be thankful for and grateful for, but we forgot God in our lives. And I think we need to go back there, and what I see is everybody's saying, hey, well, the government is our God. We can rely on them. And you're absolutely wrong. We need to go back to how we were created, how families are important, how having dignity, having morals is the most important thing, that you can have some character for you, and when your children are growing up, that they grow up with a heart towards God and have that innate component of not being so selfish but to look for your neighbor, look for your friends, look out for them before you. And that's today's wrap-up.